Hello everyone, it's David Swinowski here with Rubble Road Soapstone Kits, and today we are going to work on the Small Eagle Kit. This is a great kit for all ages, so if you want to move in a little bit closer, I'm going to show you how I'm going to use 3 pieces of sandpaper to carve up this stone today. Okay, so we have our basic silhouette right here. Predetermined thickness. We're going to concentrate our efforts on one side or the other. I tend not to do both. We're going to use 3 pieces of sandpaper here to do our work today. We're going to start off with the coarse 60 mesh. We're going to do all of our basic shaping with this piece of paper. After we're finished with that, we're going to go to a 320 grit, start to smooth that rock out, and then our final is going to be a very smooth 600 grit. That piece will feel like glass when we're done. But first things first, we will start with the 60 mesh. All the sandpapers are made for use in water, so we're going to put that in there. And then the soapstone, just kind of take a look at it. Think about which side you might want to put your patterns on. You might notice that there might be some different little things in that stone that you might want to have on your showcase side as well. Stone's pretty soft. You know, soapstone, one of those rare pieces of stone that you can actually scrape with your fingernail. So very, very soft. We're also going to put that in the water here as well today. So with the eagle shape, one of the things that I like to define on this particular shape is the wing on the front shoulder. So we have a couple little points. We have the wingtip point here, and then these are the tail feathers. So I like to try and bring my wingtip around and up onto the shoulder of the bird. For making any grooves or patterns, I'm going to use that 60 mesh. I'm going to fold that in half. This gives me a nice ridge right here. Coarse ridge. This is what I'm going to use to do my primary shaping on this rock. So with the shoulder being roughly by the neckline here, we can kind of make a little bit of a mark there so we know kind of where we're going with that particular wingtip. And then with the wing itself, I'm going to use this pushing towards the chest of the bird, and then I'm going to try and kind of curve that to match the breast of the bird as well. Okay. Then we can curve this one down at the same time. So if you kind of take a look, you can kind of see how I have that wing in there right now. But those grooves, the patterns that I put in here, they're not deep enough just yet. We need to really make sure we're carving those patterns into this stone, because once we go to sandpaper number 2, any of the patterns that we have that aren't deep enough will easily be erased with that second sandpaper. And we don't want to do that. We want to try and keep some details on this bird. We don't want to have a flat surface when we're done. And the one thing you also have to remember about when you're stone carving is that if you want something to stick out more, so for this carving, the example would be the wing. I want that wing to stick out more. I'm going to actually have to carve in on the tail feathers and on the base of the bird, and then where the feet kind of meet down on that base as well. I'm also going to narrow this head a little bit, because most animals, their head is not as wide as the rest of their body. So those are a couple key factors that we're going to work on for this particular shape. So when I'm making my groove, just trying to stay on the same track as much as I can. Chewing their way in there. Rinsing it off, trapping all that dust in the water. And then when I'm also rinsing off my stone, I'm going to rinse that dust out of my sandpaper as well. Keep that grit out nice and fresh, making my sandpaper nice and much more effective. Okay, so you can really see the form of that wing taking shape right now. Really carved into that rock. Got some definite depth on those 2 grooves that I've made. So now I'm going to narrow the head a little bit, and then I'm going to get to work on the base. So start with the head, and I just want to narrow the whole thing. So I'm not just going to concentrate on one little area. I'm going to work that whole side. Scrubbing that down. Trying to do it kind of evenly for now. And if you know you're trying to get rid of a bunch of stone in one concentrated area, you can try the thumb technique, where you put your sandpaper down and you push with your thumb. It's amazing how much strength you can get in a concentrated area underneath your thumb for shaping this stone. Very effective. So you can see where I've started to lower that head down. We've got a definite lip there, right? Go just a little bit further. I really want to make that shoulder pop out. So the more I want that shoulder to kind of stick out, the more I have to carve the head downward, flatter. Now I'm just going to try and check from my angle here and see how level, parallel I am with the surface of the rock here. I'm always checking my reference points for my scale and my symmetry as well. Round off those edges on the head as well. I'm also going to be narrowing the beak also. And I'm going to do that right about there. So just kind of deciding how large you want the beak on that bird. And this is going to make the cheek of that bird stick out a little bit further. Flip my sandpaper over, use this other corner. I'm trying not to poke into the chest of the bird, but if I do, that's not a big deal. If you do make any small mistakes, it's not a big problem. Any small mistakes, as long as we don't continue making those deeper, they will easily be erased for when we go to by the time we go to our second sandpaper. So don't worry if you make a small mistake on there. I'm just kind of making an eyebrow ridge, just carving down on the top of that beak, just to kind of give it a little bit of an eyebrow ridge, sort of right here. So we've got the head and the beak formed. You can see how I've really created that shelf for the beak as well. Narrowed that down. Now we're going to carve into the base underneath the wings and into the tail feathers here. I'm going to leave the very, very bottom of this bird pretty much the way it is. I'm going to try and leave the bottom as wide as possible because that's also what helps it maintain its stability if it's standing up. So we don't want to make that too narrow, or we don't even want to round that either. If we round that off, it wouldn't stand either. So I'm going to concentrate my efforts now into this section right here underneath the wing into the tail feathers. And for that, because it's a wider area, I want a wider ridge, not just this thin ridge. So I'm going to open my sandpaper up. I'm going to fold it a couple times. 1, 2, 3 times. Now I've got a bit of a wider ridge there. It's going to be a little bit more aggressive. And just use that to kind of whittle away and grind that stone away. constant pressure, constant contact. You should see dust every single time you're scrubbing. If you're not seeing that dust, you might want to think about pushing a little bit harder. Although when I have rinsed it off, it does take a couple of passes just to kind of get that dust going again. But open this up. I'm going to fold it again here, actually. I will fold and manipulate my sandpaper to the shape that I want, so I can do the carving I want to do. So it works best for me. I'm just going to run that across the chest of the bird to really round off that front edge as well. I want to kind of soften some of those edges. So you can really see how we've gotten rid of quite a bit of stone there. Really helping that wing just pop, right? That's what we're looking for. I'm also going to round off the back of the stone as well. Because I'm going into a more open area, I'll open up my sandpaper again. Just run it over those edges. Now you might notice that as I'm carving and scrubbing away here, where I have scrubbed, the color's a little bit more dominant. Where you haven't scrubbed, there's a grayish kind of striping caused by the bandsaw when we cut these shapes out. You want to make sure that even if you're not going to shape that or carve it, you're going to want to make sure that you still scrub it to help get those natural colors coming through. The stone that we're carving here today is Brazilian soapstone. You get just a beautiful color range in this rock. But with any rock, it's kind of like having a picture that's out of focus. And we aren't going to be able to see that color very well if we don't prepare the surface. And by scrubbing it just with this first sandpaper, it's helping getting it ready for sandpaper number 2, which will smooth it, and that will really help bring out that natural color in here as well. The beak, so I'm going to go everywhere on this carving. Even on the side that's flat, that I'm not doing any work, I might choose to put my name here, maybe the date that I carved this. I'm still going to scrub that to bring out the natural color, but I want to also make sure, even on the bottom, just a light sanding is all it takes. Doesn't take much. Just to start to bring that natural color out. And you can really see the difference between the side that I sanded and that back tail feather. Like, I haven't touched the base here yet, so it's still very, very grayish looking. We want to make sure we get everywhere as best as we can with sandpaper number 1. even in between. The little nooks and crannies, everywhere. Stone carving is not a race, it's a process. And right now, we're on step number 1, which is really important because this really sets the pace for the sandpaper 2 and 3. If we don't do a good job on sandpaper 1, sandpaper 2 is actually more difficult. And sandpaper 3, if you've left scratches behind, they will still be there by the time you get to sandpaper 3. Underneath the chin. And across the chest of the bird as well. For that flat back side, I'm just going to do my sandpaper right up, just cover as much surface area as possible. And then as I start to kind of sand that down, I'm just looking for any of the striping pattern from that bandsaw. I want to make sure that any of the scratches that are there are ones that I have put there, and not one from the bandsaw. Alright, just a little bit in there in that corner. So I'll just fold my sandpaper up, try and form that same basic shape, and then just tuck it in there and scrub into there. Carve into that tail feather area a little bit more towards the back here. Just trying to get rid of a bunch of material in there. We don't want to make it too thin in here. We want to definitely leave a bit of substance in behind. If we make that too thin, it would be prone to breaking off. If that happens, you're going to want to stop, let your carving dry, and then use a super glue and just glue that stone back together. Let that glue cure and dry, and then you can go back to carving after that. And rounding off those back wings. Really like to try and get rid of some of that square blockiness that you get on those edges. Really soften them out, round them off. And then narrow that head a little bit around that shoulder area, just to really help add that definition to that shoulder. by having that little notch at the back of the neck really helps separate the head from the rest of the body. Just gives it that extra detail, right? I really want the back of this wing to really pop out in comparison to the tail feather, so I'm just going to carve that tail feather down even more. Just trying to make that wing really pop right now. That's not too bad. There's some definite depth in the rock from the wing to the tail feathers. So the tail feathers are here. Here's the wingtip itself. So now I'm going to start thinking about what we're going to do for the base. For the base, I like to try and keep it fairly blocky, fairly solid. That way it actually stands nicely. I don't really go with individual little toes on here. They'd be pretty difficult to carve on a piece this size. A bigger piece would be definitely easier. So what we could do is we could just texture this bottom piece and just run some rasps, or some, sorry, not rasps, but run some lines into the base. Just to kind of give it a unique look. Trying to keep my sandpaper away from the beak of the bird. I don't want to carve that anymore. Pretty happy with where it's at. I want to be aware of where my sandpaper is, how I'm holding it, and what I'm contacting with it. Stone is so soft, we could use a multitude of different tools with it. So for those feet, if I really wanted to get some really fine detail on there, I could just use some smaller steel tools to do that. Chisels, gouges work really well. Although with any carvings in rock, it's those really fine details that really add up on the clock. Takes a lot of time to add those finer details. So I've just kind of got like a blocky little base here. Right, some different angles on there. Round the chest off a little bit more on that front shoulder, just to soften up these edges just a little bit. Because sandpaper 2 is also pretty coarse, you can do the primary shaping on the beak with sandpaper 1, get it close to where you want it, and then finish it up with sandpaper 2. That way you don't go too far too quickly. Because once it's gone, it's gone. You can't add any rock to it, you're only taking it away. I'm just checking the tail feather area here. I'm also going to taper that wing along the back, so I am going to get rid of a bit of stone along the side here, which is why I really kind of dug into that tail feather. By lowering that down, it allows me to add a little bit of depth and a little bit of an angle to these wings as well. And if I kind of bring that tail feather a little bit lower than I wanted to, I'll just carve into that. If I bring the wingtip, too far back, I'll just carve into those tail feathers again a little bit more and narrow them down to help bring out that wingtip again. right. Rounding off the chest here. I'm just kind of softening this wing up a little bit, trying to get rid of all those square blocky edges, trying to get rid of the flat spots that are on it. Definitely want a ridge along the bottom of that wing. Grooves on the other side here. So the stone is from Brazil. We import the stone from Brazil because worldwide it's known to be one of the softest out there. We also got a great color range in this rock as well. Varying shades of brown, varying shades of green, then also an intermixing of the two. So we get some really beautiful colors out of this stuff. And all those different colors are going to be a direct result of the different minerals that are in there, coupled with the metamorphic processes that this stone goes through. So I've got definite wing, the base is kind of sticking out. I've got a beak, got the head, that nice front shoulder there. I like it. I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'm going to leave this general shape, and I think I'm going to go to sandpaper number 2 now. So when I'm finished with my general shaping, I'm just going to tap that water out. Sandpaper 2 is a 320 grit. So we're going to get rid of all the little scratches that we've left behind with that. All the sandpapers are made for water. When you go to sandpaper 2 and 3, try your best not to scrub your sand or your soapstone on the bottom of your bucket. And the reason is sandpaper number 1. As you use this sandpaper, you can see all those crease marks where I folded it. All that grit would eventually fall off, and it is now on the bottom of your bucket. This is silicon carbide, so all those little bits of grit, if you're scrubbing your soft soapstone across them, they will be putting tiny scratches back into your carving. So try your best to just either dip your stone carefully to rinse it off, or you could even use your sandpaper almost like a cloth when rinsing it off as well. The sandpaper, if you see that writing, that side is just paper. Make sure you're scrubbing it with the opposite side. I typically fold my sandpaper in half anyway. That makes it smaller, and now I have two-sided piece of sandpaper. So sandpaper number 2 is going to get rid of all the little scratches that we just left behind with sandpaper number 1. We made sure that we got rid of all those gray stripes from the bandsaw, the tooling marks. So now it's just small scratches that we have left. If we started with sandpaper number 2 and we noticed that there are some deeper scratches on there, we could go back to sandpaper number 1, use that to make those deeper scratches shallower so that they're easier to get rid of. But no matter what stone you're carving, it's always a process. The nice thing about soapstone being so soft, we only need 3 steps for this process, and we're going to get ourselves a nice finished carving by the time we're done. Just like sandpaper number 1, you can fold this up more than once, more than twice. Manipulate that sandpaper any way you need to so that it can conform to what you need from it. Now for the base, I could fold my sandpaper up and scrub it through all those grooves that I made in the base as well to smooth those all out. But I'm going to leave a little bit of texture. I'm going to leave the groove patterns that I made. I'm just going to sand the stone around it so the raised stone will be more of a polished look, while the underneath areas will be more of a matte kind of a finish. With the soapstone, if you carve a lot of it, you'll find that not every single piece of soapstone carves exactly the same, and that is because of that metamorphic process. So if your stone didn't get as much heat or pressure, it's going to be a little bit softer. All those grooves you'll probably make in just a few passes, 6-7 passes, you'll have that groove made, whereas the harder, denser stones might take 15, 20, maybe even 30 pushes or pulls to get that groove to the same depth. Tucking my sandpaper in those hard to reach areas where my finger doesn't reach. Just trying to do the best I can. Trying to be as consistent as possible with each stage that I do. And that one flat side where I didn't put any pattern in it at all, I'm still going to bring that natural color out. So I'll just open up my sandpaper so it covers up more surface area, and then just sand this flat side without scrubbing the bottom of my bucket. And every time I'm rinsing my carving, I'm also rinsing my sandpaper, keeping all that dust out of here. That way it's keeping my sandpaper nice and clean and much, much more effective. You can sand wet or dry. Although I found I get a better sanded finish when I do use water, plus the sandpaper goes way further. I find I go through 10 to 15 times more sandpaper when I don't use water, because the dust just kind of clogs up that sandpaper and it doesn't work as effectively. Lots of rinses. Every time I rinse it off, it kind of helps me see any spots that I've missed. So I do a bit of rinsing when I'm carving, but I do a lot more rinsing when I am sanding. We still have one more piece of sandpaper to go, but sandpaper 3 doesn't really get rid of scratches that much. It just kind of smooths that existing surface that we have. So we just want to make sure all the scratches we don't want to see are gone before we go to sandpaper 3. Also rinsing, checking from all the angles just to make sure. May as well go over that bottom of that base as well. Even though it's not the last one, I'd have to say sandpaper 2 is probably my favorite. Just because we're really starting to smooth this rock out. We're really starting to see all the natural colors that are in here. Texture is starting to feel really, really nice. Can be a textural thing, like if you're not sure if you got that spot, just feel it. Feels pretty good. All right. Pretty happy with that. Pretty happy with that. I think I've gotten rid of most of the deeper scratches with my first sandpaper, so sandpaper 2 is pretty easy. It feels pretty smooth everywhere. I'm not seeing any blatant white scratches, like a few down in the base, but as I was saying before, I'm going to leave a little bit of texture in there, so I'm not too worried about that. So when I'm finished with sandpaper 2, again, tap that water out. Sandpaper 3, it's a 600 grit. Toss that in the water as well. And if you did a good job with sandpaper number 1 and 2, sandpaper 3 is really quick and easy. It just needs a quick once over with this final sanding, just to kind of put that final mirror like glass-like finish on there. Really, really smooth. You should really see that color popping right now. So now we're just matching it up everywhere. That's it. Just a quick once over with sandpaper number 3, just to make sure we're going over every single spot that we want smooth. And if you're seeing any bigger scratches right now, you're going to want to go back to sandpaper 1 or 2 to deal with those, and make sure that the scratches that you don't want are gone before you're really on sandpaper number 2. Fold that sandpaper up, tuck it into those hard to reach areas. pretty close. Once I'm all finished with all 3 stages, I'm going to take my carving, rinse it off in clean water, get all this dusty water off of there, let this carving dry. Letting it sit overnight should be more than adequate for it to be dry the next day so that you can do the final oiling after that. Use that Q-tip in the bag, apply the oil. I usually put it on top of a paper towel, let that sit for at least a couple hours, and then wipe off the excess oil, and your carving is completed. Really rinsing it off, taking a look, looking for any blatant scratches that I may have missed right now. Feeling the stone as well. Texture is a pretty big key factor at this point as well. So if you feel any scratchy parts that you don't want, well, you want to go back and make sure you take care of that. Feeling pretty good about it. I like it. I'm pretty happy with my bird. Got a very simple base. Got a nice bold wing on here. You know, tail feathers. The head looks great. Got definitely the head, the beak. Got some depth on that as well. I like it. I'm going to go rinse this off in clean water and get it to dry before I can do my final oiling. Okay, so we have our finished eagle right here and we're ready to oil. It's nice and dry. I'm going to start by oiling the flat side first. So I'm just opening up that little container of oil using that Q-tip. I'm just going to spread that evenly all over the carving here. Now that I have that side done, I'm just going to flip this over. Got a little paper towel there for me. I'm just trying to be as thorough as I can. Making sure I get all the nooks and crannies here. Tail feather area is probably going to be your toughest spot because your fingers can't really fit into there. There should be enough oil in there for the small kits to get a couple oilings out of this. I like to let this oil sit for at least 2 hours before wiping off the excess. And then I could always do another coat from there if I want. All right. Looks pretty good. I'll let that sit a couple hours and then I'll wipe off the excess from there. And there we have it. The finished Soapstone small kit. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you'd like to see other kits that we have available, please check out our website. Please like and subscribe to follow more of the tips and tricks that we have online as well. Thanks for joining me today. I'm David Spadowski with Rubble Road Soapstone Kits.